How's it going, everybody? My name is Snazzy Patty. I hope you are having a snazzy day, and today we're going to be reacting to a video by Humanity. This is How American Schools Create Violence and Stupidity. As always, the link to the original video will be in the description below. Make sure to go show your love, and let go.
American students are violent. Oh yeah, and we're also kind of dumb.
Only 37% of high school seniors were academically prepared for college, math, and reading courses.
Why are so many?
Damn, 37% is actually, like, surprisingly low. I know we're not the smartest country, but for a first world country, that's insane.
American adolescents so violent and uneducated? Because our school system is absolute garbage. 44% of American high school students experience school-related violence. 22% of students reported being in a physical fight. In the US, school fights happen all the time, and for petty reasons.
A lot of those reasons is just because, children and, adolescents obviously do not have the emotional maturity to, stabilize their emotions and not act out in rage. And also there's, that whole, standard in society where if you are not the aggressor and you aren't always ready to throw down, you are a bitch, right? You're scared to fight and you're a pussy. Then now you're the loser, right? That's unfortunate, but that's just how it is, especially with, modern culture. School is not looked at as something that you should be good at. You're good at school, you're smart, you're a nerd. It's not, something that's, I guess, really in a lot of people's priorities these days.
Hardly anybody is shocked when a fight breaks out. And this violence isn't only between students. It's not rare to hear about fights between students and teachers as well. Some students have assaulted their teachers, leaving them severely injured. There are two big reasons why fights are so common in America. The first is because school authorities put very little effort into stopping violence. As punishment for school violence, students are usually suspended for a few days.
Which, at that point, the school is basically saying it's not our problem and is giving the kid back to the household to discipline. And if, say, that household doesn't want to discipline their kid, can't discipline their kid, doesn't know how to, or just doesn't care to, or doesn't believe they should be, then that kid doesn't get a punishment. They get a free vacation. Therefore, in their, in the brain, the reward system is, okay, I got into a fight, I didn't get in trouble, I got a vacation. Obviously, you would think, being smarter, than they would understand there's a difference between getting in a fight in school versus being in a fight in in the adult world. But even as a student, you can have the other parents press charges against you.
Receive a short detention. Some students even get away with it scot-free. Students don't fear the repercussions of their violence, so they are much more inclined to fight. And another reason why fights are so common in America is because social media glorifies these fights.
Yep.
Students will
That's a big one. That's a big one. Everybody's got their phone out, recording already, just being like, oh shit, world star. Like, come on. I mean, it's 2026, so not many people use that, but during the 2000s or 2010s, every fight video, there was somebody recording, vertically, all shaky, missing half the fight, and screaming world star. You can't tell me I'm wrong.
record and upload these fights onto
Really,
TikTok and
that's
Instagram
how it was.
and get millions of views.
World Star, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. I mean, TikTok wasn't a thing back then, but even now, yeah, it gets tons of posts on TikToks of like school fights. Even Reddit, Facebook, they all have school fights. It's just, and what's weird is it's mostly grown ass men and women like watching this shit, watching little kids fight. If you want to watch some fights, go watch some combat sports. Go watch UFC. Go watch Bellator. Is Bellator still around? I don't know. That's a huge wow. One champion. That's one thing. Of one championship. Fuck it. Watch WWE boxing something. Don't be watching little kids fight. That's weird. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
This has led to a culture which treats school fights as entertainment and encourages students to fight for praise and attention. The constant violence in public schools has left many children to fear going to school.
He's terrified to come to school. Every day is the same thing, all day, from morning till the time they get out, different fights.
But school
And I guarantee you that little news segment just got that kid bullied way worse, man. Just because now his mom's in on, and on the TV. Oh, I feel bad for that kid.
fights aren't the only source of violence. Bullying is also a massive problem in American schools. 22% of middle school and high school students report being bullied at school, and half of all students have experienced school-related cyberbullying. 160,000 American children miss school every day in fear of bullying.
Damn.
A Yale study found that bully victims are between 2 to 9 times more likely to consider unaliving themselves. In America, it's not uncommon for a child to unalive themselves because of bullying. This bullying isn't just an issue of students, but schools and faculty are also responsible for this.
See, that's just, it's sad, and it's because, schools that just want to sweep everything under the rug because it's all bad publicity, and a school has bad publicity, then I don't know, maybe I don't know about all the laws and how that works, but I doubt if I know my kid's going to be going to a school with all these crazy stories, I'm going to try to get them into another school, which I'm assuming is going to give the school less money. So once again, it all comes down to money.
Students often face very minimal consequences for bullying.
The kid throwing punches was suspended for 3 days.
25% of teachers see nothing wrong with bullying, and teachers only intervene in 4% of bullying incidents. Here's a video showing a school bus driver encouraging a student to beat up another student.
That's... Oh, see, that's gonna get me. This video is gonna get me mad, guys. Bro, I got nieces and nephews. They're in school now. If I ever see a video of this going around, one, they already know they've been getting taught how to fight. They're in boxing and all that, right? So there's already that. We're gonna learn how to defend ourselves. But God forbid I still see something like that. I'm going putting hands on the bus driver, the students' parents, the teachers for letting that happen, everybody. I will be going to prison, and I don't feel like that's wrong to say that. I don't.
In Indiana, 10-year-old Sammy Toys was constantly bullied at school. He would come home with bruises, as kids would beat him up at school and on the school bus.
I don't understand how, as a parent, as a protector of a child, you can let your kid go to a school where this happens continuously, and you don't do anything about it. Clearly, the school's not doing anything about it. You, as a parent, now need to take control.
He was chased, poked, punched, and stuffed into a garbage can. Instead of helping him, Sammy's teachers punished him for, quote, disruptive conduct. Sammy's parents contacted the school 20 times about this problem, but the school did nothing. On May 5th of...
See, after the 5th time, after the 3rd time, if they didn't do anything, I would be in that school, causing a whole scene to the point where police would have to have been called and me to be escorted out.
2024, Sammy unalived himself. His bullies...
Are you fucking kidding me?
Never received a single consequence for their actions. If his school had stepped in, Sammy would still be alive. This kind of tragedy has happened in multiple schools in multiple states across America, all because schools have failed to take action. This is the same school system that breeds school shootings. There's a strong link between school shooters and having experienced bullying. Adolescents...
Alright. This is... Okay, we're moving too fast real quick. Hold on. Seriously... Rest in peace to that kid. That's fucking just... That kid is so young, too. Way too young to be even having thoughts of taking their own life. But onto this topic of bullying and all that, we need to real quick just discern, yes, obviously, if a kid is, going through shit, and has mental problems and then is bullied and all that, there's a more likelihood chance of that to happen versus a person who has mental problems but isn't treated differently or is bullied at school. But bullying is not the case here, because a large majority of people who have been bullied at some point in their lives don't go ahead and commit mass atrocities like that. So that's still, that comes down to that there's more to it than just being bullied. There's mental issues going on that are at play. Seriously wicked stuff is at play in that person's mind to want to commit such heinous crimes.
Who have been bullied at school are 49% more likely to carry guns. Our school systems program violence and hatred into students, so it should be no surprise that school shootings are so common in America. But school districts put very little effort into addressing and fixing the root cause that leads to school shooting incidents. If schools actually stood up against bullying instead of always letting it slide, school shootings would decrease drastically. The American school system creates generations of toxic and violent individuals who have learned that they can get away with hurting others. Violent kids don't suddenly grow out of it one day. They simply become violent adults. But the only thing worse than a violent generation is a violent and uneducated generation. America spends $857 billion annually on K-12 schools, which is $16,280 per student. That's more money per student than any other country. But America...
So how are we so uneducated as a country? You know what? I feel like it mostly has to come down to just the fact that society doesn't prioritize education, or at least the right kinds of education. Because I know countries like, especially like Northern Europe, like Sweden, Norway, all those Scandinavian countries are doing really, really well in like almost every regard of their life. Economically, medically, educational wise. I don't know about their military budgets, and of course everybody makes fun of America like, oh, we put all our money into, our defense budget instead of our education or our healthcare and all of that. But if that's the case, then we still put all that money into our defense budget and still spend the most on our schools than any other country? How are we getting these results?
America ranks 26th in math and 10th in science. Only 26% of 8th graders are proficient at grade level math. One large reason for this is a shortage of teachers. Do you want more high quality videos like this one? Then subscribe right now.
Alright, back
to the video. American teachers are paid less than the typical working American. Along with this, American teachers work an average of 53 hours a week, 7 hours more than the typical working American. This is because teachers have a lot of duties beyond simply teaching, such as grading, lesson planning, and administrative tasks.
And all that.
And to make matters even worse, students are often disrespectful or sometimes even violent towards their teachers. As a result, the teaching...
Yeah, I've had multiple classes where I spent almost the entire year never learning a damn thing because the classes were just so disruptive and bad and the teacher had no control over it. Specifically, I had a 6th grade science class. It was a free-for-all every day. Like, I looked forward going to that class just because I'm like, oh, I know I don't have to do anything for the day, like for that class. So, and yeah, he's definitely got a point with the whole teachers not getting paid enough for how much they actually have to do and how much, or like, so much is like they are teaching the youth, the future generations, to run this country and to fill up all the jobs that need to be filled and be actual, functioning members of society. Yet they get paid like dog. They get paid dog shit amount of money compared to other jobs that do way less.
Industry has become very undesirable for many people, leading to a shortage of teachers.
And then like students just don't respect teachers anymore. So they can't get control of the classroom. And I'm not saying that the teachers need to go back to putting their hands on students. If you have to resort to that, then I think that's just, you're failing as a, once again, an adult. Like, if an adult needs to put their hands on a child or an adolescent to get their point across or something like that, then you need to work on your communication skills better, I guess. But I do agree that sometimes, the kid just needs to get a good old ass whooping.
February of 2020 and May of 2022, 300,000 public school teachers quit their jobs. That's roughly 3% of the workforce. Because of this shortage, teachers are now assigned massive class sizes, which makes it harder for each student to receive the specialized help they need. This also means that school districts have lowered standards for hiring teachers in order to make up for the shortage. The number of underqualified teaching hires increased by 69% from 2022 to 2023. Now, American schools are full of terrible, incompetent teachers who are hurting the country. I remember back in high school, teachers would assign us massive packets of reading and questions. Meanwhile, they would sit in their stupid chairs and use their computers instead of actually teaching the class.
If you would just get up and teach them instead of handing them...
This guy. I saw a video not too long ago where he's at. He's, nothing crazy, but just to prove that he actually had a head on his sense, because I'm pretty sure, like, if I can remember correctly in the video, he's doing pretty okay. He doesn't have a bad life.
Freaking packet, yo. There's kids in here who don't learn like that.
This guy was on to something. I say kid,
in
but
America,
he was,
it's very common.
I say kid, but he was a high schooler when I was a kid, so he's a grown ass man compared to me.
To come across classes where students are forced to learn everything by themselves rather than be taught. And no matter how much students and parents complain, school districts almost never do anything about it. Due to the shortage of teachers and the protection from teachers' unions, school districts can't just replace teachers who aren't doing their job. With such terrible teachers, it's only natural that students aren't learning properly. And another big problem is the lack of funding. In America, a big portion of funding for public schools comes from the taxpayer money of the community. This means that schools in wealthy communities are well funded, but schools in low-income communities are poorly funded. So if you live in America, your quality of education and therefore your prospects of success are largely determined by the community that you live in. This problem can be seen in low-income cities like Detroit, where only 3% of fourth graders are proficient in math. Low-income students enter high school with literacy.
See, I can actually like confirm this. So growing up elementary till about 6th grade, I was in a, a what's the term? Impoverished school district, and it definitely showed, especially once I switched over and I had moved to a middle class school. Definitely way more preppier kids, fucking annoying. But anyways, the educations, the whole like everything about it was different. Like teachers cared more, the classes were better structured, students cared more about their education, or at least like it was more quiet. You rarely only had a couple kids here and there that actually, for the most part, like disrupted the class. On average, everybody was either zoned out, not paying attention, or it was basically just that. It was just everybody was quiet because either you were listening and focusing, or you were zoned out or half asleep.
Literacy skills 5 years behind high-income students. Only 14% of low-income students graduate college, compared to 60% of high-income students. It's quite clear that schools in lower-income communities need more funding. America spends $857 billion annually on public education. So where is all of that money going?
Yeah,
well,
that's what
a
I'm
big chunk
asking.
of it is going towards administrative staff. From 2000 to 2019, the number of administrative staff increased by 88%, and the number of principals and assistant principals increased by 37%.
For what? Nothing's changed about schools in like ever. What's that one guy that made that video? How 100 years ago phones looked like this, or and now today phones look like this. Why? And then here's a classroom 100 years ago. Here's a classroom today. It looks the exact same. Schools aren't changing, and it's their job. It's these guys, the principals, the administration. They're the ones that put in the rules and the changes and implement them into schools. But nothing's changed. So why are they getting more money?
While the number of students and teachers only increased by 8%. This shows how a disproportionate share of resources is going into administrative functions rather than directly supporting students and teachers. Maybe if funding was actually allocated correctly, our academic performance wouldn't be so low. Education in America has been in a steady decline for a while now. The government tried to fix these problems by implementing academic standards called the Common Core, but this actually made things even worse. Common Core sets standards for what students should know at each grade level to ensure that students are learning efficiently. And now this all sounds good on paper, but in reality, Common Core has only hurt the education system of America. First off, Common Core operates with a one-size-fits-all approach, which assumes every student learns at the same pace. This system takes power away from teachers and schools, who understand their students best, and instead dictates students' learning based off the government's own ideals. And the biggest flaw with Common Core is the confusing math methods it imposes onto children. You have 8 seconds to solve this math problem. Go.
Oh, I do. 45? Taking a guess, 45. No, 35. Damn, I'm stupid.
Was your answer 35?
No, I'm dumb.
Well, you get 0 points. If you didn't use the quantum linear dimensional isolation method to solve the question, then you didn't do it correctly. This is the BS that every child in America goes through. You see, Common Core requires students to solve math questions using confusing steps and algorithms. If students don't use these methods, they automatically fail the question, even if their answer is correct. As a kid, I had a very hard time understanding Common Core math, which led to me constantly getting low scores on my...
See, I struggled at math and science for a majority of my school. Like my school years, especially geometry. I failed that twice, so I'm not going to talk about that. But, I have to agree, because when it came down to the actual, like, show your work, I would also run into the same problem where I would show my work differently than how the teacher would do it because, my parents, I'm having them help me with with my school homework, right? And they're doing it the way they were taught, and it's different. And yeah, not all child fits all. Everybody learns differently. People learn visually, through being it, they can watch it through videos. They have to be physically shown it. Then some people have to actually do it and be corrected as they're doing it. Some people could just look and read notes and learn. Like, everybody learns differently. So there comes in that quote, from that video I mentioned earlier, about the whole 100 years schools versus, now versus, then versus now, where the quote goes something like, if a if you go along, valuing a goldfish's intelligence off of its like ability to climb a tree, then it'll spend its whole life believing it is dumb. Because obviously a goldfish can't climb a fucking tree. But if you give it that expectation and you set that as the standard but it can never reach it, it's gonna always feel like it's a failure.
Tests and classes. It was insanely demoralizing and I felt stupid. Well, it turns out I'm actually really good at math. In high school, where Common Core is less present, learning calculus was very easy for me, and I scored very highly on my exams. I also got a near perfect score on the math segment of my SAT. So how come learning basic algebra was so difficult for me as a kid? Common Core has created a very confusing system of learning, which has led many students to learn less efficiently and hate their classes. Common Core? More like Common L.
That was dumb.
You might be wondering, how does terrible education affect America? Well, the effects are really bad. Because so many students receive terrible education, America now has the worst educated workforce in the industrialized world. 54% of US adults have a reading proficiency below the 6th grade level, and 21% of US adults are illiterate. This is embarrassing, considering we are the wealthiest country in the world. Now you know how bad America's school system is. So how do we fix it? Well, it's actually quite simple. Firstly, to address violence and bullying, schools need to hold students more accountable. Currently, students barely receive any punishment for bullying and violence. There should be more severe consequences, such as mandatory community service or being expelled. This seems like a very simple fix, but very little.
Yeah, but the problem with expelling a student is that it doesn't. Yes, it's a punishment, but it's a punishment where it's hard to come back from, because that means you now have to either go to PM school or you have to go to an entirely new school district, right? And to do that, you have to now get your parents to move, because you cannot send your student to a district that you're not paying tax dollars for. So now you're costing your family a ton of money and stress that is a very real possibility. They could end up taking out on you. Not every parent is perfect. It's not a good thing to do, and I'm not excusing it. It's just something that does happen. And not only that, but now this kid has that on their record, the school record. Getting into college, forget about it, At least, I don't know. I didn't go to college. I don't know. I could be ignorant on this situation. But at the end of the day, a student's going, I don't know. Because kids are going to get into fights, We are always learning and growing. And as kids, we are extremely immature and ill-knowledged, So to give such, I fully agree, community service. I love that idea. Put them in community service. Make them work. Put them in, instead of OSS, ISS. I always found that way worse. If I had to get ISS, I dreaded that shit. All right? So, after school, some community service after school, and ISS, plus some, I don't know, something else maybe. But I don't feel like expelling is the way to go. Those other approaches, 100%. But expelling, no. I don't agree with that.
Progress has been made.
Obviously, if they're in actual danger and there's no coming back, they've already been punished multiple times and they're just repeatedly getting in trouble, and it's to the point where it's not just they're disrupting class, but they are putting students and teachers and themselves in harm's way, then yes, you have no other choice. But that should be the last measure.
Address the shortage of teachers, America needs to pay teachers more. I mean, we clearly have the money to pay them. Where's that $857 billion going? We also need to remove these teachers who do nothing but hand out packets. The school system is paying them as they contribute to the academic downfall of the country. The problem of low-funded schools is also a pretty simple fix. Public schools need more funding from state and federal governments. Also, Common Core needs to go. There has not been any academic progress attributed to the implementation of Common Core. Common Core is only hurting the academic progress in America. I recently made a video about the horrible education systems in many Asian countries, where students study up to 16 hours a day and get physically punished. These countries have the exact opposite problems that America has. Countries need to find a middle ground between these two extremes and maintain a system which develops hardworking and competent students without sacrificing their mental health for success. The truth is, this goal isn't too far-fetched. Take Finland for example. Finland ranks number 7 in education, higher than China and the United States. Yet students in Finland receive very minimal homework, and the majority of primary and secondary school students enjoy their education. This shows how it's definitely possible to create a school system that's both effective and enjoyable. If we take the right steps, we might be able to bring our countries closer to this ideal school system.
Alright guys, that's gonna be the end of this video. This guy, Humanity always with some really good points, and great video. Again, make sure you go check him out, subscribe, all that stuff. He's way bigger than me, obviously, because I've only been doing this for a couple months now. But anyways, to what he's saying, that we need to find a middle ground, that's with everything in life. Life is a balancing act. It's always, you got to find the right middle ground. I mean, it's as common as, the golden bear story. This one's too hot, this one's too cold, this one is just right. That's with everything in life. You got to find your balance and the balance of the world, and things can really start to move forward. Obviously, that's a lot easier said than done, but man, if we don't try, then we'll never get to it. So, when I have kids, if shit doesn't change in America, you best be sure I'm moving to one of these countries like Finland or something with some better education. But as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed. If you do, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you want to check out his other video that he was just recommending. If not, that's fine. As always, guys, stay safe, stay snazzy, stay blessed.